Everything is energy, and there's a simple vibration trick you can use today to stop feeling like reality is pushing back against you. What if the voice you've been calling me is not the origin of your experience, but a broadcast? What if by changing the frequency of that broadcast, the world begins to respond differently, not because of some mystical override, but because your attention, physiology, and behavior change in predictable ways? That's the working idea behind this practice. Energy as a practical, testable metaphor for how you move through the world. Before we get technical, try one quick thing with me. Set a timer for 60 seconds. Sit comfortably. Your only instruction, try not to have any thoughts. If a thought appears, and it will, notice it like a passerby. Let it drift and don't chase it. No judgment, no analysis. Just observe the arrival and departure of thoughts. Pause the video now. Set a timer for 60 seconds, try the experiment, and come back when it ends. If you prefer to continue and try it with the voice guiding you, stay here. I'll walk you through a silent minute version in a moment. Either way, do the exercise now and see what proves itself to you. Welcome back. If you did that, you probably felt something curious. Your mind didn't go blank. Thoughts kept arriving uninvited. Maybe you noticed how quickly a memory, a worry, or a plan popped in, as if thoughts were like weather passing through a sky. That experience, thoughts appearing without deliberate authorship, is the first piece of evidence for the practical claim we're exploring. You are awareness, not the stream of content that flows through it. A brief scientific anchor. Decades ago, Benjamin Libet and subsequent researchers observed that certain neural activity leading up to a voluntary action appears before people report the conscious decision to act. In plain terms, some brain processes begin before the conscious feeling of choosing. Neuroscience now talks about much of cognition as predictive and largely unconscious. Those findings don't settle grand metaphysical questions. They do, however, align with a simple, usable insight. A lot of what you experience as you deciding actually arises from processes you don't directly control in the moment. Another physiological anchor that helps translate the metaphor of energy into something measurable comes from research groups such as HeartMath. Scientists have recorded electromagnetic patterns tied to cardiac rhythm and shown that states of coherence in the heart-body system correlate with measurable physiological variables. Again, this doesn't prove any sweeping mystical claim, but taken together with what we can observe day to day, these data points make it reasonable to treat internal state as something that radiates, in a physiological sense, and that shapes attention, posture, tone of voice, decision-making, and therefore the way others and circumstances respond to you. We're using energy and vibration here as both a poetic shorthand and an operational map. Think of your nervous system, your posture, the cadence of your thoughts, and the tone in your voice as the signal you broadcast. When you identify completely with the content of thought, fear, scarcity, resentment, you broadcast a certain frequency. Jittery, inconsistent, often desperate. When your baseline is the clarity of awareness, calm, coherent, spacious, your broadcast changes, steadier, centered, inviting. That difference matters because perception filters what you notice, and actions follow perception. Tiny shifts in broadcast lead to different behaviors, and over time to different outcomes. This is not about magic. It's about causal chains that begin with attention and end in action and opportunity. Attention influences physiology. Physiology shapes behavior. Behavior changes relationships and circumstances. The vibration trick is simply a structured way to shift the source of your broadcast from thought content to awareness, and to practice living from that source until it becomes the habit. To make this usable, I'll give you a toolkit with specific time-bound practices. We'll begin with the immediate experiential test you just did, and then move into short daily habits that create reliable change. These are designed to be incremental and verifiable. Nothing here requires belief, only curiosity and disciplined observation. First practical step, strengthen the separation between thinker and observer through labeling. For 7 days, spend 5 minutes each morning doing this micro-practice. When a thought appears, don't dive into it. Name it out loud or in a notebook with a one-word tag. Planning, memory, worry, judgment, fantasy, desire. The instruction is simple. Label, then let it pass. If you do this consistently for a week, you'll begin to experience a felt distance between the content and the I who notices it. That distance is the foundation of the frequency shift. Why labeling? Because the act of naming interrupts automatic fusion. It creates meta-awareness, a mental gap, and with that gap comes choice. Once the gap opens, you can choose whether to respond, to explore, or to let the content dissolve. Labeling is a tiny hinge that swings you from reactivity towards observation. The second step is source tracking, a slightly deeper practice to be done over 14 days. When a charged, repeating thought pops up, the ones that make you feel stuck, ashamed, or small, ask a simple question. When did I first remember this thought? Then write down the first memory that surfaces, without commentary or defense. This is not therapy, it's reconnaissance. Often a persistent thought is a recycled story, an echo of a classroom remark, a family pattern, or a cultural narrative you absorbed. Mapping origin points neutralizes the claim that the thought is fresh and authoritative.
It reveals lineage, where the thought came from, and lineage reduces conviction. A small vignette to make source tracking concrete. Imagine you have a recurrent thought, I don't belong. During your 14 days, you notice it before an important meeting. Instead of reacting, you journal. When did I first remember this thought? You might recall a childhood classroom where your idea was laughed at. That memory is the origin story. By seeing the chain, event to belief to current reaction, you stop treating the thought as an absolute truth and begin treating it as a standing rehearsal you can interrupt. A compassion note here. If tracking origins brings up traumatic material or intense distress, these practices were not meant to replace professional care. Use them gently and seek support if painful memories resurface strongly. Many of these techniques are safe for everyday recalibration. For deep trauma, collaborative work with a trained clinician is important. Now let's translate the energy metaphor into a daily stabilizer, the awareness anchor. This is a twice-daily, 10-minute practice that trains your baseline to be the field of awareness rather than the content of thought. The steps are concrete. Find a quiet seat, take 3 slow, deep breaths to orient the body, and then rest attention on the simple fact of noticing. Don't try to stop thinking. Notice thoughts as objects appearing in awareness, like birds on a wire. Spend the session shifting gently between the felt sense of awareness and the peripheral flow of sensation. If emotions flare, note them with a word and return to the sense of seeing. Do this once in the morning and once in the evening. Over weeks, the nervous system learns that it can rest in clarity even when thoughts arise. If you're ready, I'll lead a brief live version now. There's no need to pause the video. Follow my words. Take a comfortable position. Soften the face and neck. Begin by taking 3 full, slow breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, letting the shoulders drop with each exhale. Now bring your attention to the sense of being aware. You might feel a slight spaciousness behind the eyes, a quieting in the throat, or simply a felt sense of wakefulness. For the next 2 minutes, notice whatever thoughts come up without following them. If a plan appears, tag it planning. If a memory arises, tag it memory. If a worry shows up, tag it worry. Say the label silently or softly aloud, and then return to the sense of awareness that noticed the label. If an emotion surfaces, notice the body sensations associated with it without trying to change them. Allow the sensation to move through you like weather. As you practice this, you may notice that the quality of your posture, breath, and even facial expression subtly shifts. That's the physiology part of the energy metaphor. A calmer internal field tends to produce a steadier outward signal.
This steadiness matters because other people, opportunities, and even your own cognition are sensitive to the tone you emit. After the mini practice, take a moment to note 3 simple observations. What came up most often, thought category, where you felt sensation in the body, and whether the overall tone felt closer to static, jittery energy or to a coherent, steady frequency. Jot these down in a notebook you'll keep for the next 30 days. That notebook will become our reality response journal, the evidence-gathering engine for the experiment we're conducting with your life. We'll build that journal into a week-by-week protocol soon, but for now, start by recording your observations after each anchor practice. Let's step back and look at the mechanism we're training. Imagine a radio. Thoughts are the content, songs, chatter, adverts, flowing across channels. Awareness is the receiver. When your receiver is fused with one particular station, a recurring fear, for example, you're limited by the song that plays. When the receiver is clear and steady, you can choose the station, adjust the dial, or notice static and change settings. Practically, this means that when you habitually identify with particular thoughts, your attention narrows to confirmatory evidence, your body tightens, and your behavior becomes aligned with that limited story. When you habitually rest in awareness, your perception widens, your physiology relaxes, and you notice options you would otherwise miss. There are 3 common sources of thoughts worth naming so you can target them differently. First, direct sensory responses. A car horn squeals, you think, I'm late. These are immediate, rooted in the present sense world. Second, personal history loops. A criticism from your past replays as a present fear. These are often emotionally charged and repetitive. Third, collective field imports. Patterns that emerge from cultural narratives and the people around you. The chorus of shoulds and musts. All three appear in awareness, and all three can be observed, labeled, and gradually disentangled. Part of the vibration trick is not to deny content, but to change the origin point from which you respond to it. If a thought is a sound on the radio, the trick is to shift the station by shifting the receiver's posture and tuning, a combination of attention, breath, and embodied presence. That shift changes what you notice and therefore how you act. To make progress predictable and trackable, we'll layer the practices across time. The first week is about labeling and noticing. The next 2 weeks deepen into source tracking so you understand what you're repeatedly broadcasting. Then, by weeks 3 and 4, you will be using the awareness anchor consistently and adding a daily reality preview routine, a short morning practice where you stand for 2 minutes and imagine, from awareness, how you'd like your day to unfold, noticing your felt tone and bodily posture as if you were already broadcasting that state. That preview is not wishful thinking, it's a rehearsal for a different operating system. People sometimes worry that talking about energy and vibration is airy or unscientific. That's why I keep pointing back to measurable mechanisms: attention, breath, heart-body coherence, and behavior. When heart math researchers talk about cardiac coherence, they're pointing to a physiological marker correlated with calm clarity. When Libet's work shows anticipatory neural activity, it's a reminder that many mental processes are not consciously authored. These findings are interpreted by some as hinting at deeper interconnections. We're borrowing them as anchors, useful, suggestive, but not gospel. A practical example: in relationships, broadcasting from a place of anxious thought often reads as neediness or defensiveness. You might over-ask for reassurance or misconstrue neutral remarks as criticism. When your baseline is awareness, you still have feelings, but you don't fuse with them. You respond from steadiness. That leads to clearer communication and different social feedback. In work and creativity, a thought-identified broadcast winds up as hesitation and second-guessing. An awareness-centered broadcast tends to produce bolder, more aligned action. Across health and finances, again, the mechanism is indirect. Attention shapes choices. Choices change habits. Habits accumulate into outcomes. The energy model doesn't promise instant wealth or miraculous healing. It points to a probable shift in how you move, and therefore what you find. At this point, you may be asking, how do we know the world responds? The short answer is, keep a record. That's what the Reality Response Journal is for. Over 30 days, we'll document your baseline patterns and weekly changes, so you can see correlations. Correlation is not proof of causation, but it is practical evidence that can validate or falsify the hypothesis for you. Many people who do this report increased synchrony, small opportunities showing up when they act from awareness, smoother conversations, or a different tone in their work. The experiences vary. The consistent factor is disciplined observation. Before we move deeper into the structural programs, the full 30-day identity shift protocol and the week-by-week journaling template, I want to give you a short, actionable sequence you can apply today to reduce chaotic broadcasting in a moment of stress. Think of it as an emergency tuning. Step 1, 3 grounding breaths, as before, to downshift the sympathetic arousal system. Step 2, label the main thought or emotion that's present. Say it aloud. Worry, anger, I'm not good enough. Naming it dislodges its claim. Step 3, do source spotting for 30 seconds. Ask, when did I first remember this? If an image or memory surfaces, note it quietly. Often the emotional intensity loses its immediacy when you find the antecedent. Step 4, reset the posture. Uncurl the shoulders, soften the face, lengthen the spine, and take a single forward-moving choice that aligns with a more coherent broadcast. A short clarifying message, a small action toward a goal, or a deliberate pause. These 4 steps are the quick version vibration trick. Breathe, label, trace, and act from a recalibrated baseline. I want to be explicit about boundaries here. This is not a cure-all. If you're dealing with clinical depression, panic attacks, or traumatic flashbacks, these practices can support recovery but are not a replacement for therapy, medication, or other clinical interventions. Use them as supplements and consult professionals when the material you uncover feels overwhelming. You've now tried the 60-second experiment, learned a 7-day labeling practice, seen how a 14-day source tracking step works, and practiced a short awareness anchor sequence. You've also learned a quick 4-step recalibration you can use in real time. If you kept the brief notes I suggested, you already have the kernel of a reality response journal, categories of common thoughts, early observations about your baseline,
and the felt sense of your internal signal. As we move into the next phase, we'll flesh out the 30-day reality response journal, break down the identity shift protocol into 4 precise phases with daily tasks, and map the practices to specific life domains so you can run controlled experiments in relationships, work, health, and finances. We'll also introduce curated tracking templates to help you gather clean data, frequency of recurring thoughts, 2-minute post-intervention affect scores, and weekly notes on external shifts you observe. For now, keep practicing the anchor twice daily, label thoughts for 7 days, and when charged patterns appear, do the source tracking step. Before we transition into those deeper protocols, take 1 more minute with me. Sit upright, place your feet on the floor, and take 3 slow breaths. Bring to mind one recurring thought that tends to color your day. Name it. Ask, when did I first remember this? Notice what comes up. Then, for 30 seconds, rest in the awareness that noticed the question. There's no need to change the thought. Simply practice broadcasting from the receiver rather than the content of the station. If you did that, you've already felt the first micro shift. It may be small, a slightly different breath, a softening around the eyes, a momentary ease. That is the beginning of coherence. Over time, those micro shifts accumulate.
The rest of the program teaches you how to stack those micro shifts into a daily architecture, so your baseline gradually moves from reactive static to a steadier, more coherent frequency. In the next section, we'll set up the 30-day reality response journal in detail, with weekly objectives and sample entries, and we'll introduce the identity shift pathway that translates new beliefs into repeated, embodied choices. For now, hold that small felt difference you just discovered, and notice how it changes what you expect will happen next. Now we'll turn that small felt difference into a full, testable 30-day inquiry you can run on your own life. The instrument for that inquiry is the Reality Response Journal, a simple, repeatable log that collects 3 kinds of information each day: the patterns of your inner broadcast, the interventions you apply, and the external responses you observe. Over 30 days, this ledger becomes your evidence base, raw notes you can analyze for correlations, not pronouncements of destiny. Begin by dedicating a small notebook or a digital document to this journal. On day 1, create 4 front-page fields: baseline notes, thought categories, intervention log, and external observations. Baseline notes are a short paragraph describing how you feel this morning, physical tone, dominant mood, and any headline thought that occupies you. Thought categories are the labels you'll use, for example, planning, worry, memory, judgment, fantasy, shame, excitement. Intervention log is where you note which practice you used that day: labeling, source tracking, awareness anchor, reality preview, and the exact duration. External observations are short timestamp notes about anything in the outer world that felt like a response: a conversation that went differently, an email that arrived, a new idea that landed, or a stressful moment that didn't escalate. For the first 7 days, your objective is to build baseline awareness and consistency. Each morning, spend 5 minutes on the labeling practice. Notice thoughts as they arise and name them: planning, memory, worry, judgment, fantasy, desire, then let them pass. Twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, do the 10-minute awareness anchor. After each anchor session, write 3 lines: the most frequent thought label, the primary bodily sensation you noticed, and an affect rating from 1 to 10, 1 constricted, 10 expansive. This is the data that allows you to see whether your internal frequency is shifting at all from static toward coherence. During days 8 through 21, your focus deepens. Continue the daily labeling and the twice-daily anchors, and add source tracking whenever a charged thought repeats. When you notice a persistent thought, one that consistently pulls your attention, ask, when did I first remember this? Write the first memory that arises without analyzing it. Do this for at least 1 recurring thought per day for 14 days. In your journal, include the prompt used, the memory that surfaced, and a 1-sentence reflection on whether the memory changes the authority of the thought. If the memory softens your belief in the thought, note that as 1 data point. If it does not, note that too. The goal is not emotional cleanup, it is reconnaissance. You are mapping the lineage of repeated broadcasts so you can diffuse their insistence. From day 15 onward, add the reality preview practice each morning. For 2 minutes, stand or sit with an upright spine, breathe lightly, and imagine the next 3 hours from the vantage point of awareness. Not fantasy, not imagining a wish fulfilled. Rather, preview the day as a series of intentional actions you would take if your baseline were calm and coherent. Feel the posture, the tone of voice, and the small choices you'd make. Then immediately after the preview, write a 1-line intention and a 1-line anchor. Intention describes a concrete next step you will take. Anchor is a physical cue you'll use to return to awareness. For example, tap 2 fingers on your chest, take 3 slow breaths, or soften your jaw. Over days, this rehearsal trains the nervous system to embody the frequency before events occur. Weeks 3 and 4 are where the experiment returns to structured measurement and synthesis. Keep the morning labeling and the morning preview. the twice daily awareness anchor, and the source tracking on repeating thoughts. Now, once per week, take a 30-minute synthesis entry. Review the past 7 days' notes and write a short summary under 3 headings: patterns observed, interventions that seem to matter, and external shifts noted. Patterns could be high-frequency labels, e.g., worry often shows between 10 and 11 a.m. Interventions that mattered might be brief anchor before meetings reduced my reactivity, and external shifts might be received an unexpected collaborative email after presenting from awareness. Use these weekly summaries to test hypotheses. For example, if I do the morning preview before meetings, I will notice clearer communication. Then plan the next week's micro-experiment to test that hypothesis. To support clean data collection, structure daily entries in a simple 3-line format if that helps you maintain discipline. Line 1, morning baseline, 1 sentence. Line 2, intervention log, what practice and duration. Line 3, external observation, 1 concrete event. If you like numbers, add quick quantitative fields: frequency count of recurring thought occurrences that day, post-intervention affect score, 1 to 10, and number of noticeable external responses. These metrics are crude but invaluable for spotting trends. Let me share sample entries so you have a concrete model. Week 1, day 3 might read, morning baseline, tight chest, headline thought, I'll look foolish in the meeting.
Intervention log. Labeling 5 minutes. Anchor 10 minutes, morning. Preview 2 minutes. Affect after anchor 4 out of 10. External observation. Asked a clarifying question in meeting. Someone nodded, no sign of ridicule. Week 2, day 12 could read, morning baseline. Memory of being shushed at 9. Headline thought, don't speak up. Intervention log. Source tracking. Childhood classroom memory noted. Anchor twice daily. Affect 5 of 10. External observation. Sent a short follow-up email proposing a collaboration. Received warm reply. Week 4, day 28 summary. Patterns observed. Worry labels spike before midday. Anchor reduces spike by roughly 30% on days I do it. Interventions that mattered. 5-minute labeling plus preview before meetings correlated with clearer outcomes. External shifts. 2 small opportunities appeared after presenting from awareness. 1 new contact followed up. Remember to treat these entries neutrally. A single success is not evidence of proof. An absence of change is information too. The practice is iterative. Refine labels, tweak the preview, vary anchors, and compare weeks. Over 30 days, you'll either see patterns that support the hypothesis, that shifting identification from thought to awareness changes the tone you emit and the opportunities you notice, or you won't. Either outcome is instructive. Parallel to the journaling experiment runs the 30-day identity shift protocol, a focused pathway for reconfiguring habitual I am statements, because identity language consistently shapes broadcast frequency. This protocol has 4 phases, each lasting roughly 7 to 8 days, and each built around daily tasks that take between 15 and 30 minutes. Phase 1 is inventory and noticing. Spend the first week generating a list of 20 common I am sentences you use about yourself. Write them plainly. I am anxious. I am not creative. I am bad with money. I am the peacekeeper. I am the person who gets taken advantage of. After you list 20, choose the 5 that feel most charged. For each day of the week, practice the 5-minute labeling in the morning, and then spend 15 minutes writing about one of those 5, tracing recent moments when the statement showed up and noting the immediate effects on body, breath, and action. The aim is not to argue for a new identity yet. It is to map the current identity's operational footprint. Phase 2 is deconstruction and reframing. In days 8 to 15, for each charged I am statement you identified, create an observational alternative. If your habitual claim is I am anxious, reframe it into an experiential sentence like there is anxiety present now, or anxiety shows up as tightness in my chest. The language intentionally shifts from fixed identity to contingent phenomenon. Each morning, read the observational sentences out loud for 5 minutes, and then spend 10 minutes embodying them in the awareness anchor practice. Later in the day, when the old statement appears, deliberately replace it with the observational sentence and record the difference in your journal. The goal is to move from fusion, I am anxious, to observation, anxiety appears, a subtle linguistic pivot that reduces automatic belief. Phase 3 is rehearsal of alternative identities. Days 16 to 23 are for generating aspirational, embodied identity phrases grounded in present moment behavior. These are not vague affirmations. They are specific action-oriented statements like, I choose to speak clearly in short, honest sentences, or I notice my breath and pause before reacting, or I open to one creative idea and act on it today. Each morning, spend 5 minutes in the preview practice, imagining the day lived from that action identity, then spend 15 minutes enacting micro-behaviors consistent with it. Micro-behaviors are concrete. Speak 1 sentence that clarifies your position. Take a 5-minute focused creative sprint. Make 1 small money-related decision that aligns with prudence rather than avoidance. Journal whether living from these micro-behaviors changed outcomes that day. Phase 4 is consolidation and integration. In the final week, days 24 to 30, alternate mornings between the labeling, the preview, and a short review of your weekly summaries. Choose 3 micro behaviors you want to stabilize as habits and set a simple monitoring rule. Perform the behavior daily and log yes, no, impact on mood 1 to 10, and 1 external consequence. Continue source tracking for any stubborn recurring thoughts, but primarily practice responding from the embodied action identity. At the end of the 30 days, write a synthesis: which identity statements have weakened, which action identities became easier, and how your external observations correlate with those shifts. An example of how identity shift shows up in life: imagine your long-standing "I am not creative" belief. In phase 1, you note that the thought spikes most when facing blank pages. In phase 2, you reframe it to "blocks appear when I face a blank page." In phase 3, you rehearse an action identity statement: I show up for 15 focused minutes of creation regardless of output. Over several repetitions, you notice you are less fearful and more likely to finish something. Your external note might be a message from a collaborator who liked your unfinished sketch. The change is not mystical. It is the predictable result of reducing fusion, rehearsing new behavior, and therefore encountering different responses. Throughout this process, keep 2 safety measures in place. First, maintain compassion when you encounter old identities that feel stubborn. Do not moralize setbacks.
Second, if revisiting origins unearths deep trauma, pause the experimental work and consult a qualified therapist. These practices are helpful for everyday recalibration and self-observation. They are not a substitute for clinical care when deeper wounds are present. As you pursue both the reality response journal and the identity shift protocol, you'll need a simple analytic framework for interpreting results. At the end of each week, answer 3 questions in your synthesis entry. What pattern repeated? What intervention altered that pattern? What new external event correlated with the change? When you tie an internal shift to an external response, ask what intermediate behavior likely produced that response. For example, did a calmer tone in a conversation lead to less defensiveness from the other person? If so, the mechanism is likely attention, physiology, behavior, response. If you notice opportunities arriving without obvious behavioral change, treat them as anomalies that deserve further observation, rather than proof of metaphysical causation. Part of the work is learning to distinguish anecdote from pattern. One unexpected positive email after a day at anchoring is interesting. A series of meetings that go smoothly across several weeks while you maintain the practices is data. If you observe consistent correlations across contexts, relationships, work, and finances that parallel your tracked interventions, you have a robust case for continuing and refining the practice. If not, you have the clarity to try additional or different microbehaviors. It's useful to map the practices to specific life domains with concrete microbehaviors so you can run targeted experiments. In relationships, your microbehaviors might be: pause 3 counts before responding. Name your sensation if triggered. I feel hurt right now. Make one small request rather than a long justification. In work and creativity, they could be: start with a 2-minute preview before a creative session. Do a single focused sprint of 20 minutes. Send one concise update email instead of over-editing. For health and body regulation, anchor practices are primary: a morning breath/awareness session and a brief movement routine that signals steadiness, a 7-minute walk or a 3-minute stretching sequence. For finances, microbehaviors include reviewing one budget line item for 5 minutes, creating one small automated saving action, or reframing anxious money thoughts as threat signals that prompt a planning behavior rather than avoidance. To make these domain experiments rigorous, set an intention and a measurable rule. For example, for 7 days, I will pause 3 counts before responding in personal conversations and log yes/no each time. I will also note whether the conversation's tone shifted. After a week, evaluate whether pausing correlated with fewer escalations or better resolutions. These are small, low-stakes experiments that cumulatively test the core hypothesis. Shifting the actor from thought-fused reactivity to awareness-centered choice changes behavior, and therefore what you encounter. A few concrete vignettes illustrate how this can play out. Consider someone who habitually broadcasts scarcity around money. Their internal narrative starts arguments, tightens muscles, and produces hurried decisions that reinforce scarcity. After 2 weeks of labeling, awareness anchors, and a daily 2-minute preview focused on measured financial choices, they report a different internal posture before paying bills. Instead of automatic avoidance, they review one line item, notice the bodily constriction, breathe, and choose a small payment plan that reduces stress. Over the month, their inbox shows fewer overdue notices and more manageable conversations with service providers. The mechanism is mundane. Attention and breath reduce the urgency response. Reduced urgency leads to clearer decisions. Clearer decisions lead to different external outcomes. Another vignette. A creative professional repeatedly thinks, I have nothing original to offer, and therefore postpones pitches. After practicing source tracking, they identify the thought's origin in a critique from early career feedback.
Reframing into, I notice the critique thought when I prepared a pitch, and rehearsing a micro behavior of sending one short pitch per week yields multiple responses: a warm reply, a collaboration invitation, and one rejection. The key is the steady production of small acts that create feedback loops. The energy model here is simply the observation that a less defensive posture allows for consistent action, which produces external opportunities. Throughout, maintain the language of probability and correlation. Many practitioners report experiences commonly described as synchronicities: unexpected contacts, smoother meetings, new ideas arriving at opportune moments. Treat these as meaningful signals to be noted, not as proof of metaphysical command. They often arise because when your baseline steadies, you notice and act on possibilities you would otherwise miss. There will be days when nothing seems to change. Those days are part of the experiment. Record them without judgment. Often, plateaus precede stepwise changes. If your journal shows no notable external difference after a full month of consistent practice, adjust variables. Increase the frequency of anchors, change the previous focus, try different microbehaviors, or extend the identity shift timeline. The method is flexible. The core requirement is disciplined observation. Let's be practical about maintenance. After the 30-day experiment, you will likely want a sustainable routine.
A recommended ongoing practice is 20 minutes each morning, 5 minutes of labeling and micro-review of that day's headline thought, 2 minutes previewing the next 3 hours with an embodied posture, 10 minutes awareness anchor practice, and 3 minutes of setting a physical anchor cue. Twice daily anchors can be reduced to once daily if life gets busy, but the morning session is critical because it sets the baseline for the day's broadcast. Keep your reality response journal as a living document. Every month, do a 30-minute synthesis comparing the past month with the previous one. Look for changes in the frequency of charged labels, shifts in average affect scores, and concrete external events correlated with those shifts. Use these comparisons to iterate. The practice is not one and done, it is an empirical lifestyle experiment. I want to return briefly to the language of energy and vibration, because these metaphors carry weight and risk. Treat them as two things at once: a poetic shorthand that makes the experience visceral, and an operational map that links attention, physiology, and behavior. When we say you are broadcasting a frequency, we mean that your pattern of attention, breathing, posture, and the cadence of your speech produce a measurable physiological tone that others sense and that your own cognition uses to filter what to notice. Research groups such as HeartMath have measured cardiac coherence patterns and shown correlations with physiological markers. This is one piece of a larger puzzle. Similarly, Libet's experiments remind us that conscious awareness often follows preparatory neural activity. These findings are suggestive. They do not, by themselves, prove any metaphysical claim about consciousness controlling reality. Use them as coherent anchors for practice: helpful, cautious, and humble. There are also cultural patterns to consider. Collective narratives, family scripts, workplace norms, social media discourses color the thought streams that pass through you. Source tracking often reveals how much of what you broadcast is borrowed. Naming these imports is liberating because awareness exposes them as not inherently yours. When you practice broadcasting from awareness, you naturally filter the cacophony of collective drafts and choose behaviors that feel aligned rather than reactive. Over time, this selective attention reshapes both your inner life and how the outer world tends to meet you. A few practical troubleshooting notes. If you find the labeling practice each morning instead of writing, or use a timer to practice micro-labeling in the middle of the day. If the awareness anchor triggers intense emotion, shorten it and add a grounding behavioral step: a short walk, a call to a trusted friend, or contacting a clinician before continuing. If you're skeptical, run the 30-day protocol with a simple hypothesis and treat it as a curiosity-driven experiment. Skepticism is a healthy tool in this work. Ethics and humility matter. Don't use the metaphor of energy as a way to shame others who haven't shifted. This is one practical approach among many. Never suggest that people who experience hardship are responsible for every difficulty due to their vibration. Life is complex, and many structural, relational, and systemic factors are outside individual control. The strength of this method is in helping you maximize the range of action available to you, not in blaming you for situations that require collective intervention or structural change. Finally, a short guided closing practice to integrate what you have learned. Sit comfortably and take 3 slow breaths. Bring to mind one recurring thought you chose to work on during this program. Notice without argument the sensation that accompanies it. Label it once, silently. Ask, when did I first remember this thought? Allow any memory to appear. Note it, and return your attention to this simple, non-judging sense of awareness that noticed the question. Spend another minute previewing the next hour as if you were already broadcasting from that field of awareness. Notice posture, tone, and one small action you'll take. Hold that micro-intention gently, and when you feel ready, open your eyes. If you've kept the notes and taken the practices seriously, you now possess a clear experiment and a live dataset. You have the tools to continue refining your internal signal and testing how the world responds.
The promise embedded in the phrase, everything is energy, is not that you will command reality like a switch. The promise is more pragmatic and profound. The quality of your awareness shapes the quality of your attention, your physiology, and your choices. And those variables reliably influence outcomes in ways you can measure and iterate. If you want the exact templates we've used in this 30-day framework, a printable reality response journal, a daily entry sheet with the 3-line format, a weekly synthesis template, and a calendar for the 4-phase identity shift protocol, there's a downloadable packet available that contains everything you need to begin tomorrow: the journal layout, example entries, prompts for source tracking, and a 1-page quick reference for the morning 20-minute routine. Use it as a scaffold, adapt it to your life, and run the experiment with curiosity rather than expectation. You are not the unceasing chatter in your head. You are the space that receives it. Practice tuning that receiver. Practice choosing the micro-behaviors that embody a steadier signal. Over time, your habitual broadcast will change, your attention will widen, and the patterns of your life will begin to respond in ways that feel different, not because of magic, but because of clear, observable mechanisms you can test and refine.
If you're ready, download the Reality Response Journal template from the link in the description and start the 30-day experiment today.